Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Culture Days. I'm Bill Wilson, and I'm here today with Dave Rogers. Dave and I have been friends for over 50 years, and he's going to chat to us today. And first, I'm going to pass it over to Dave, and he is going to do an acknowledgement of the lands.
Well, thank you so very much, Bill. And as part of the Culture Days in Canada, it's great to be here. And we are like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabeg. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties, is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon, Wampun Agreement. And it is a wonderful opportunity to be celebrating Culture Days, creativity here in Canada, and to our friends who might be viewing in around the world. Thank you so much for joining me, Bill, and let's start off.
Well, just a quick little background on Dave. Like I said, we've been friends forever. And Dave's a global financier, he's an author, and he's also a mental wellness advocate. So first off, Dave, why don't you tell us about your experience as a mental wellness advocate?
Wow. It's been quite a journey of being able to go through the types of experiences that, again, when you and I were young as hockey players, young guys being raised in Canada, in Toronto, and in Malton, a very cross-cultural type of experience. And it was during those times that we had what today would be called traumatic experiences. And then as I moved from Canada and then I moved to Japan and entered into the finance career, I was exposed to different types of mental issues with people with burnout, insomnia, stress disorders. In fact, today it is called post-traumatic stress disorder. And my own personal stories, I wanted to not only share that because it almost killed me at age 27. And going through some of those stories, which again, a lot of the work that I've done, whether in the coaching field, in the therapy field, in the timeline therapy field, it was something that I've worked a lot on myself. Yet when I came back to Canada after being away and working in finance for over 3 decades, I noticed that mental health issues had really taken a front page here in Canada.
Yes.
The amount of people that are suffering, are not knowing what to do. So I actually went out and met up with a number of healthcare professionals, not only in Canada, yet in New Zealand, in Singapore, in Japan, and the States, and I interviewed them. And I interviewed them on some of the things that are the most challenging for people right now. And I decided to infuse it into a new book, which really focused on mental wellness, really allowed some of my personal story to be shared, and then some of the winning strategies that people can start applying in dealing with depression, in dealing with suicide, in dealing with manic depressant, Ritalin, the different types of drugs, diet. And so that's been something that I'm really thrilled to have come up with, a collaboration of best approaches, of best efforts, of bringing curiosity, of bringing coaching into one's wellness. And the mental wellness issues right now have been even increased with the COVID experience, with people suffering from isolation and depression even being raised up even more. And so as opposed to suppressing it and putting it down, actually, I'm really looking to elevate the conversation and encouraging people to explore it more.
Excellent. So can you elaborate a bit more on your journey, like maybe some of the people that you dealt with, maybe some of the nurses, people of family, that sort of thing, who helped you
Wow.
along
Yeah,
your
absolutely.
mental issues?
I would start down in New Zealand, where again, New Zealand's often referred to as the first sun. It's where the financial markets start. It's where the day starts. And I worked with a lady who's actually put together the protocol for elderly care. And so a big part of our conversations was looking for protocol and approaches and strategies to really bring in the elderly care component for everybody, for heightening awareness of really great protocol that allows care to be given in a respectful way, in a curious way, and also shifting your mindset about elderly care, because that's been the part that's in the past since COVID, that the elderly have really been hit hard by it. and working with Jilly, who is a nurse, yet she's a nurse who created a business in setting the protocol, the standards for elderly care centers in New Zealand. If I then shift to friends in Singapore, who I did a lot of research with, and that was in palliative care. And
Okay.
palliative care, in fact, her nickname was or is Death Nurse, because
Okay.
every week she's working with people who were passing over, and she's that almost that last caregiver who really goes through the experience of talking to people as they're on their deathbed. And she really taught me a lot about adding that compassion, about the curiosity, yet also the incredible respect that she did. And it was often simple things at people's last requests. And she would often have to really bring in this realm of curiosity, respect, and compassion. And so for the last 5 years, we've been talking a lot about that. And I interviewed her on a number of times on the way that she manages her own energy, the way that she works with the transitioning of humanity, because so she's meeting so many people. And then another person I connected with is a lady who won the Florence Nightingale Award. She works with the International Red Cross, and she's gone around the world into some of the most horrific experiences of genocide and Ebola, and she's brought in this professionalism to nursing, this professionalism that is so left brain in the structure and the deliverable, yet right brain in the component of creativity and having to work outside of comfort zones. And so I was able to infuse these three people's views of mental health care, mental wellness. And then I also have some wonderful friends here in Canada, doctors and nurses, that I wanted to ask them about some best practices. So that's infused throughout the book in assisting a procedure, yet also a story that allows my personal story of going through depression, of potentially looking at suicide, experiencing friends' suicide, and infusing that into the conversation as opposed to suppressing it and keeping it hidden and secretive, and maybe with embarrassment and shame, which are often associated with mental illness.
I think that's a huge point, though. I think now we can come to the time where it can be a team aspect. We can work on all this. It doesn't have to be something to hide, something to be shameful about. No, get it out there, and then we can help each other. I think it's a huge time right now, especially. Like you've created your own team. Let's help each other.
Let's have circles where we get, right now I'm involved with some men's circles, men, boys communicating, setting positive role models. I've been working with some collaborations in the ideas of mentoring, the area of communication, and a big part of it's been women empowerment and leadership. Now, that is often is confused to being putting women ahead of everything. No, it's actually working collaboratively with women, engaging the conversation, and then let's come up with some creative strategies. And I
Yes.
love the sign we have right now, find your creative place. It's even looking at creative expressions, because in the therapy I've done and explored and written about, it's about finding different expressions of creativity. And whether that's art therapy, music therapy, nature therapy, these are all wonderful strategies to help and assist people from moving from that state of victimhood to that state of curiosity, to that state of shifting and changing and transitioning in a positive way.
Excellent. Now, I love that book. I love your book, Get 2020 Vision. It was really good. Now, in the book, you talked about mapping out a program of resourcefulness, harmony, and peace, and that it's essential for healing. So, what would you invite our guests today to experiment with to deal with the isolation, I guess, that we're going through right now and experiencing with everything that's going on with COVID?
Well, that's a great question, Bill. And the idea here is that it is not one size fits all. And I think that's one of the areas that it's not me telling anybody what to do or a doctor telling you what to do. It really is about an individual taking added responsibility for their wellness. And whether that's some different types of prayer, that could be some types of reading, it could be some types of nutrition. And so could be laughter. And so it is about creating a recipe, and it's a recipe that we can take more responsibility for. And I think that's the key for so many people, is that they want to give their wellness responsibility away. In fact, we're programmed to that. Like when we're feeling a little ill, we go to a doctor, he prescribes us drugs, and that's what we do. And then we're supposed to be feeling better. What I guess I'm inviting people to do is to start writing, to start being curious, to start finding ways that make them feel better. And right now we're going through the transition from summer to autumn. Go out and spend some time seeing the changing of the colors. Nature can teach us so much about our wellness if we allow it. As we move from autumn into winter, we're going to have to, again, adjust what we eat, the way we exercise, what we say to ourselves. In the book, this Get 2020 Vision, I wanted to share some practical approaches to creativity. So for some men, starting to write poetry, starting to draw, these might be things that you didn't do because at 7 or 8 years old, you were traumatized, or you were told you had no talent, or you can never make a living. Well, guess what? These days, by exploring that, it might be a way for you to reconnect to your higher self and then progress into a healthier, wealthier lifestyle.
Yes.
So I guess that's what I'm inviting people to do, is if you haven't read a book lately, maybe check out the library or check out the online world. Look at ways to nurture your learning. I believe that that component, people who are really committed to their learning, and I love the idea of helping people find their learning styles. Because if we have a learning style and we start to allow ourselves to learn in the way that we're best suited to learn. Because when we were younger, when we used to play hockey, we used to practice like for hour after hour after hour. We created some mental muscle around that. Whereas if you have dyslexia and you were in the school system and it wasn't diagnosed, you kept telling yourself, you're dumb, you can't read, you're dumb, you can't read. So you became negatively associated with learning. Yet maybe then you started working with your hands and you started drawing and you started playing music, and that lit your soul up. And that's what I'm inviting people to do, particularly now if you're in your 50s or your 60s, you've been diagnosed as depressed. Start looking for ways to perhaps look for new ways that allow you to have some simple joys. Simple joys could be creative place. This whole culture days, one of the things they asked us to do and they invited us to do was to just do some art. And so that was done yesterday. And it was just, they gave us the blank piece of paper, but I don't remember the last time you did any sketching or drawing or painting. Yet that is, I feel, one of the ways for us to reignite the genius in us, reignite the inner artist, the inner creative. And I believe that that might be something that people today, if they're watching it, they can start to explore, and it may transform, transmute, and actually shift the way that they do their life.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So with everything that's been going on with COVID, I mean, a lot of the stuff that we're going through, it's just been so negative. Where have you encountered something in relation to COVID-19 that, like, an impactful item that was negative, but when you faced it, then it became a positive experience?
Well, I guess one of the great examples is when I started being asked to speak and to conduct workshops. And so far, it's been beautiful. I've done workshops in South Africa with the travel industry, in St. Martin's in discussing suicide, in Singapore with seniors, in Indonesia with the Indo-Indians community. I'll be doing another one in Jakarta this week. And I invited people to actually explore what COVID has taught them. So if you're looking at all the negatives of COVID, then guess what? You're seeing all of the negatives in COVID. And I express empathy and compassion that that's where you're at. And that's the beautiful thing, is that as a caregiver, listening is probably 80% of contributing to the benefits of people. Yet when you're noticing if they're focused totally on negativity, you might ask a question that shifts their focus. Because when we shift our focus and we start to be creative, it can totally change the experience. So the example I would do with you right now is COVID, COVID. Pick a word that starts with C that maybe COVID has taught you or helped you with.
Right. Well, something
Putting
that
you
was
on
big
the
with me
spot a little
was
bit.
connection. Yeah.
Connection.
No, I'm.
Terrific. So connection.
Yeah.
COVID's taught you connection. And what we've done is actually you and I, we've reconnected. We've connected in a whole new way. We're using technology. We're not feeling lonely and isolated because we're actually allowing COVID to connect.
Yes.
Okay. So I would say for me, it's been compassion. COVID's really helped me with compassion. How about O? What would be an O word that COVID has helped you with?
O was observation.
Beautiful observation. Again, and see, right now you're shifting your relationship. COVID's taking a new meaning just by doing this exercise. For
Yes.
me, O is optimism. I have a choice whether to be pessimistic or optimistic. I've often said my identity is a cautious optimist. And so as a risk manager, that's what I used to do. I had to measure the risk and then put a trade on. As a bond trader, that's what I used to do. How about a V? What would V word has COVID taught you?
V was virtual.
Virtual. Again, beautiful. Again, if we can look for ways to allow virtual to go beyond borders as opposed to feeling isolated. For me, it's been vibrancy and having a vibrant lifestyle with COVID. And I have been encouraging people, and they've been doing videos, they've been getting exercise, they've been connecting with nature. Very good for shifting their belief around COVID. How about an I?
I was innovation.
Innovation. Fantastic. Again, right now you can see how you're shifting using innovation. And for me, it's been a couple there. Yet I've played with intuition, and I
Okay.
like intuition, tapping into intuition, trusting my heart. This has been a test of that intuition. And how about D?
D was develop.
Develop. Again, developing yourself, developing others, such a beautiful way of looking at COVID. And for me, a D, the biggest distinction, which is a D, that I had with people who did well or are doing well with COVID are people that have really been able to be disciplined. In fact, the people I noticed, and this even came when I had a chat with my therapist, is the people who found COVID very, very difficult is their routine was ruined and they couldn't find a new routine. The people who
Oh,
did
okay.
really well with it were people who were able to shift, create a new discipline, maybe started some exercise or started some writing. And those were the folks that found COVID to be quite nurturing. And so discipline's one that it's a key component when I'm working with the men and boys community. Get the people to start having a little discipline. When you start saying what you say and doing what you say, that's a discipline. And some people, that's the starting point to make the transition. And so that's a little exercise that we've done around the world. And you can see how just that shift in what COVID means can shift many of the words that you are associating with your experience with it. Developmental. And again, each of the words that has a meaning for you. And so if you were to repeat COVID, can you just give me what COVID's meant for you? COVID.
I had connection, observation, virtual, innovation, develop.
And so how do you feel about COVID now?
Oh, it definitely comes out to having a much more positive, like the. I mean, it's that huge little exercise. Um, it it just shifts everything to be looking things. Okay, I can look at things in a new perspective. I can look at things in a positive light. No, it was very good.
Very good. Well, that's one of the exercises we did in South Africa. That's where we came up with it. And people in South Africa who've been in shutdown for over 183 days now, a lot of them are really suffering from isolation and depression. And so shifting a little bit of the words, and then some of them became curious. Again, a very important word, as opposed to shifting and blocking yourself, being curious about what are the ways to be creative. And I think that's what's really great about this whole week, this whole month that we're going to be doing with the culture days in Canada is looking for creativity, looking for this creativity of culture and then ways to engage with people in a different way. And that's so much about, if we're going to shift our mental wellness understanding, we're invited to look at it as a challenge as opposed to a victimhood.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's one of the things in the book I talk about. It's you can either play above the line, where you have this component of ownership, accountability, responsibility. The word there is or. It's like you have an or for your life, or you play below the line. And below the line, it's B as in blame. You blame everybody. You make excuses for everything. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm not smart enough. All of these excuses. And finally, these excuses that you're making right now, that's where if you do work with a coach or a mentor, they can often call you on your language, call you on your words, call you on your belief structure. And then D, BED. It's as if you'd be better off just staying in bed all day than living a life where you're living below the line as a victim, where you're blaming everyone, you're making excuses, and you're doubting. Oh, I doubt that can work for me. Oh, I doubt I could be very successful. Oh, I doubt I could be a million. I doubt. And so that doubting part of one's life is something that really stops people from actually designing, co-designing a life that they can. And that's one of the things that we really wanted to focus on in Get 2020 Vision, is to assist people in being more present and being more positive and being more persuasive in designing their own life.
I think some of the stuff that I've learned from that, I think is a huge thing about patience, because a lot of the things that you just mentioned, when somebody's playing the victim, I've found it's a real good test for patience. That it's you can't push them and say you got it. It's got to be slow and be patient and let them sort of wind the way and gently guide them towards the positive side.
Patience has been one of my biggest lessons from COVID, and particularly in the arena of elderly care.
Yes.
I've met a number of people who have been sort of feeling they're being forced to do elderly care. Fortunately, I about 18 months ago, I made the decision to get more active in the caring for my elderly parents. And it truly has changed my life from three major words: compassion, daily. Like, that's a beautiful thing. When you're doing elderly care, you can't like, I'm going to be compassionate Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm going to be an ass Tuesday, Thursday. No, it just doesn't
No,
work.
you
And
got to
so,
do it every day.
exactly. And so there's a habit there of compassion. And then there's patience. It's that we see our parents perhaps when we're young kids. And now as 80 and beyond, they are changing, they're transitioning. And so that patience with me, which has been great, because a lot of what I talk about in Get 2020 Vision is when we're projecting negativity, it's often how we're feeling inside. And so much of this mental wellness improvement is working inside out, being kinder, being more compassionate to self, being more patient with self. And that is such a key component in allowing oneself to heal and to let go. And again, so many of the pains that are affecting people right now are self predicated. It's the way you're speaking to yourself. Expectations is a big one. When we hear people, they expect it. When's it going to go back the same as it was? We can't unscramble these eggs.
Right.
We've got to find a way to move forward with it. And it can be glorious, like this conversation. There's this idea of using what you've been talking about, innovation and development, that these new methodologies can bring people together. And that's what I'm congratulating the Brampton Library, the teams that are around, the culture days here in Canada, looking for ways for people to connect in new creative spaces.
Yeah. No, it's great what's happening. I mean, for me, some of the learning experience, definitely the patience and developing new ways to look at things and guide people through that. Like you're saying, they have that negativity, or especially with the elderly care, um, looking things at different perspectives, but also reminding us about our history of events that we've gone through. I mean, sometimes as simple as the mask issue, right? We all went through the seatbelt issue way back when. So just I mean, that's a very, very simple thing from what you're saying. But yeah, developing and patience. There are a lot of positives of what are coming out of that we're learning from this anyway.
Absolutely. Very good.
So, out of all the things that you've been doing, what are some resources that our guests could use to investigate, research, and have conversations to become better informed about mental illness, depression, and those sort of things?
Well, again, I do believe that right now online there are fantastic resources. And whether you're the type of person who likes to learn through video, which again, YouTube, of course, has got lots of video. Don't take everything you see on YouTube as gospel. A lot of the resources, whether you do a Google search and you find some information, which there's great information from the Canadian Mental Health, there's information from the American Mental Health Association. If you're thinking or you know somebody who's engaging in self harm or suicidal thoughts, talking to people, there are wonderful programs that suicide prevention. There's hotlines that you can have conversations, and of course, then there's going and talking to a therapist and talking to friends. And you're not alone, I believe, is one of the major messages, is that if you can find a way to heal from within, which is again a big part of it, and heal from within might be finding more creative expressions. I asked a question to our listeners about on what ways you're being creative, and I'm aware that you've been very creative in the last couple of months. Would you share one or two things that you've done to be creative?
Oh, my big thing is I found this program called Doodly, and it's a video making program, and I've learned how to do my own little cartoon videos. It was great, and just all kinds of ideas come forth. It's do one video, learn, and then all of a sudden a bunch of more ideas will come out. Learn more, do more videos. It's been great.
And so that's the neural connectors are the synapses are being nurtured, and it will grow. And so that's the component that I would like to encourage people, is the creativity component of doing videos, storytelling, writing, the nature components of walking in nature, enjoying trees, enjoying the sounds of nature, the music component of listening to soothing flute music or singing rap or allowing yourself to be more expressive. It then, as you move, there's going to be some new triggers that maybe you will feel a little restless and you need to go and start letting go of your old beliefs. And one of the things in Get 2020 Vision, I really wanted people to see that the way you were 10 years ago is likely different than the way you are today. And if you can be more creative and letting go and then learning and applying and bring laughter and joy into your life. Now, some people say, well, yeah, it's easy for you to say. Well, guess what? It wasn't that easy when I was 27 and I really was insecure and I thought I was going to commit suicide. It wasn't easy. And that's the type of story I want to tell, not to glamorize suicide, yet to be more curious that most people, again, the number is over 50%, have suicidal thoughts in their life. In our group right now, Bill, it's one of the highest groups in the world. Over 50-year-old men have the highest propensity of suicide. Now, why would that be? It's often comes down to a sense of isolation.
Mhm.
It's a sense of readily available products. In fact, the country that has one of the highest levels is New Zealand. And I spent a lot of time over the last 20 years working with people in suicide circles and talking about it and letting go of some of the trauma that gets impacted, whether a family member committed suicide or a friend tried to commit suicide. And again, those conversations are now being encouraged because it's that being able to say it maybe for the first time releases the trauma. And then you can start to ingest, you can creativity, expression, writing a song, creating a poem that allows it to be honored instead of shamed. And I think that's a big shift. If we can work on people letting go of their shame and finding I teach the hero's journey.
Okay.
And the hero's journey is a story where it's used in Hollywood for most of the sci-fi movies and most of the hot, exciting movies where you're in a comfort zone and then you step outside of your comfort zone and then you got your perils, your pits, and you go into problems. Going through that problems, you'll often have to engage an elderly sage or mentor who will share something with you that's a little bit weird, yet you go and experiment with it, and then you come out with a superpower because you've been tried, you've been pushed to the limits, and sometimes it's from that pushing. It's in nature, it's called perturbation. It's like when the grass pushes through the ground. It's that last area that allows it to push through seems to be the the toughest. Yet that's what allows you to have the power to take the next journey in your life. And so it's something to study. I think storytelling is a great thing because you also get to see all the stories you're telling yourself,
Hmm.
and then you can start to rewrite these stories from the perspective of being a victor instead of a victim. And that's
Oh,
again
yes.
what we're doing with our circles, with our groups. We're encouraging people to go and experiment.
Yes.
Such a cool word. My friends who might be really suffering from isolation or depression or bipolar, they might not be doing the experiments that are positive
Yes.
experiments
Okay.
with your art, experiments with your music, experiments with your physical being, your eating and nutrition. And it's very important if you're going to allow yourself to grow and to live victoriously.
Definitely. And sometimes, like you mentioned in your book, sometimes it's not the most difficult thing you have to do. Sometimes it could be just as simple as taking a breath.
Wow, breath work is absolutely a great field for people to study, Bill. In fact, in the conversation I had with student-led suicide chats in the Caribbean, it often will come down to breathing. Uh, Funny thing about breathing is that most people just take it for granted, yet there's different types of breathing techniques. And if you become a student of breath work, it truly will change your life because there's breathing through one nostril, exhaling through the other nostril. There's deep breathing through your mouth. There's exhaling through your nose, and all of that changes the different neurology that you have in the neuroscience, which can shift. When people get nervous, they tend not to breathe. And
Right.
so this is very important, even in public speaking, in confidence, in allowing yourself to communicate effectively. And so breathing is definitely a key one that I think we could probably run a whole workshop on different types of breathing techniques.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you see it right now in the NBA playoffs, right? Every time a guy steps up for a foul shot, what does he does his 3 or 4 times bouncing the ball? Take a deep breath, focus, and who knows? Sometimes you're sending a brick, sometimes you get a swish.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's just so many things, like just even if in the whole thing that I've learned is just increasing my levels of respect for people, watching the people and how they're dealing with things. Going back to the COVID acronym there, like my observation, um, the people that I've been able to see that have been dealing with this in a positive manner, it just gives a whole brand new thing for respect.
Mm. Respect's a really fascinating word. It's probably a misinterpreted word because if you look at many of the jails around the world, a high percentage of those people who are in the jails felt disrespected. And it's like we experienced a little bit of that in Malton, where sometimes just looking at somebody in one way or another could lead to a fight. And in our day, it was fights, just drop your gloves and go at it. These
Yeah.
days, there's guns and there's knives and there's a level of violence that has increased. Yet the idea of looking at people, looking up, looking down, looking across, can trigger the feeling of disrespect. And again, where does that disrespect live? It often will live inside. Is that very aware that they're often disrespecting themselves. They're being triggered. The disrespect is often inside. So I love what you said about respect and being a student of respect and finding ways to honor and respect. And in fact, when I was in India doing a talk there, and a big part of the Indian philosophy is tolerate. They want to tolerate others. And I was curious with people, and I asked, well, what would happen if you shifted from tolerating people to accepting people?
Okay.
And then I asked, well, what would happen to this world if we moved from accepting people to honoring people? And so there could be something there of respect, honoring, accepting. And I believe that we as a Canadian culture have a fairly high level of respecting others, accepting others. In fact,
Yes.
I believe one of the things that makes Canada so great is that we often will honor. I think we do a really great job of honoring different cultures, different foods, different rituals that make
Oh,
Canada a
definitely.
really wonderful place to be.
Oh,
Uh,
definitely.
Especially the food component. I
Oh,
believe that that's one of the greatest things that we can do as a culture is to break bread, to share, to eat the different types of food that make this month of activities with Culture Days going to be, I think, very exciting to go and go do a search around the country in the different types of cultural events, whether it's music, whether it's dance, whether it's mental health. And these are areas that we can get better at. And I'm encouraging people to step up and to explore it as a way to allow Canada, to invite Canada to be one of the top nations in the world to engage COVID differently.
definitely. Definitely. Well, have you noticed for yourself, um, when you focus more on the positive things, like, are you able to channel your energy different?
Well, from a neuroscience perspective, when you breathe in, just like what you just said, breathe in, the neuroscience of our brain shifts. The tapping into what's called dose, and I talk about that in Get 2020 Vision. It's the dopamine, it's the oxytocin, it's the serotonin, and these are all natural ingredients in our body that get released when we breathe, when we hug, when we speak. And so, if you shift your physiology, if you look down and you're always saying negative words, you're going to feel down. Now, if you shift your shoulders and you bring your shoulders back and you take 3 deep breaths and you say something, yes, it's going to shift the neural science, the neurons, the endorphins in your body will shift. So that is scientifically proven these days. People who stay sedentary, they lie in their bed, like ultimate depression, folks will be staying in their bed. They won't want to see sunlight. They're not moving. They're not hydrating. They're probably filling themselves up with drugs that is not being allowed to circulate in their body. And it's no wonder they're feeling like a log.
Yeah.
And so one of the first things I do when I'm working with people that as a hypnotherapist is even going into the hypnosis. Now, hypnosis is a fascinating word. Most people think it's the woo-woo that's shown in Hollywood. No,
Yeah.
hypnosis is something we do to ourselves all the time. Think about
Okay.
it. When we have a day, throughout the day, are we not going into altered states of consciousness?
Okay. I understand.
So
Yes.
hypnosis is about applying various techniques to go into altered states of consciousness. And so as a self-hypnosis is talking to yourself in a certain way, just like what you saw about the basketball. So
Right.
dribbling the basketball, oh, this is piece of cake, piece of cake, piece of cake, whoop, piece of cake. And so there's a ritual there of hypnosis. And
Okay.
so self-hypnosis goes on all throughout the day. Now, people who are depressed, they've been told they're depressed, get diagnosed as depressed, they then lie in their bed and they're depressed. How are you feeling? Depressed. What are you going to do today? I don't know, I'm depressed. And so
Right.
that hypnosis is keeping them in that state. And so when I'm working with people from a therapist perspective, it's often about getting them to shift. Do you want to be depressed today? And so asking questions is what we talked about earlier today. And I really
Yes.
appreciate the questions you're asking today, because it's obvious you've put some time and energy into the questions, and that sets a frame of the conversation. And so people, I believe I'm inviting them to take more responsibility for the conversations they're having with themselves.
Okay.
Having a conversation with others can be uplifting or it can be demoralizing. And so our self-talk is so important in whether or not we're going to have a good day.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And so, and that day is broken into hours, and those hours are broken down into minutes, and those minutes are coming down to the seconds that we breathe, the seconds we change our physiology, the seconds that we put in a thought, and we shift the self-hypnosis. And so, yes, I love that science of it, because this is where science is catching up with the spirituality of it. And the spirituality of it in a number of the books I've written now, I talk about spirituality and people go, oh, are you talking about religion? No, the root of the word spirit is esprit. The Latin root of esprit is breathing. And
Oh,
so what
okay.
you said, Bill, is so important. So much of our ability to connect, to collaborate, to co-create come down to breathing, having a certain level of consciousness, presence, and then hopefully after we have a conversation with someone, they feel uplifted from the conversation.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, when you can bring all that positivity into it, it's great. Now, what would you think of, like, where would your attitude fit in all of this?
Attitude. Well, immediately when you say attitude, I'll tell you how my mind is linked.
Okay.
It's attitude of gratitude.
Oh, okay.
And
Hmm.
so I'm going to give you two stories about this. It's pretty
Okay.
cool. So attitude of gratitude is something I really work on daily, because I truly believe if you wake up in the morning and you write down or you list or you give thanks for 3 to 5 things in your life, it shifts your focus and allows you to be more grateful. Going through the day with gratitude, there's also an element of humility there in gratitude. Now, I'll flip it, because one of the things I love to do with people is to get them to look at the opposite. Okay.
Okay.
So the opposite gives you the contrast. And
Hmm.
so that's very useful. And so in the book before my last book, which was called Entrepreneur X Factor, one of the first chapters is written about a gentleman called Justin, who created a brand called Attitude, was able to sell it for 8 figures. And it started because somebody at church, an elderly lady at church, told him he had a bad attitude and that he would never amount to anything. The next Sunday, he showed up at church with 3 of his best buddies, all with a t-shirt with bad attitude on it. He then took that idea and then started doing the markets of Australia and sold millions of shirts. His main brand was called Bad Attitude.
That attitude.
Now, this guy, he takes a portion of his sales and he builds orphanages in Africa.
Amazing.
So
That's
he would
amazing.
have a meaning of bad attitude, right?
Right.
Now, he did it to piss her off. That was definitely part
Yes.
of the strategy. Yet he then harnessed that energy to become one of the best brands in Australia. And so part of his motivation, which again, he beautiful storyteller about it, is that, and the more he pushed to sell t-shirts, the more he knew he was pissing her off when everyone was walking around with bad attitude t-shirts.
That's
So,
very good.
so
That's very good.
that's where individuals got to come in. That's where individual music, individual art, individual expression is so cool. And that's what's happening right now is we have these platforms that allow different people to communicate in different ways. And we'll find our tribes, or we'll nurture, hopefully, a real respect. And I'm that's where I'm excited to be part of culture days and creativity and communication. And these are part of the solution as we move forward, that are going to allow people to be more well and more healthy, and hopefully more healing. I believe that we are in a healing phase right now, so that mental health component is such a key component.
Excellent. Um, no, I like that story. It seems it fits along. Um, there's that you can, like from the stuff that we just talked about, there was um, the respect disrespect thing of the elderly lady thing, and then he channeled the energy that was generated from that and had the bad attitude, and then from there it's like he can go back and teach that elderly lady, and here's what I was able to do with it, here's what you could have done. But then um, she actually taught him originally, okay, here's your attitude, you have a choice of how you want to do with it. So I think that's a pretty good thing. What things have you been finding that you're teaching yourself and you're teaching others, but others have been teaching you? What sort of things are you finding with that right now?
Well, I, I, great question. The thing that you triggered, and that's what I love right now, is when you ask somebody a question and you let them answer. It's such an important thing. Most people, again, if you do your research on this, about 80% of questions that are asked, they're not asked because you're curious. You're asking it because you want your beliefs validated. And so it's really bizarre. We haven't been taught how to ask questions.
Very
And so
true.
I love that you're asking a question and you're curious, and therefore you're going to learn a lot. Because if you ask somebody a question, you let them answer, you're going to learn something. So my answer to that, which you triggered by asking the question, is how people are a mirror for ourselves.
Okay.
And so when I get angry, it's not them getting me angry. It's something they've done triggering something in me. And often, to be honest with you, growing up in Malton and being a sports guy like yourself, disrespect was something that got triggered really easy for me when I was growing up into my 20s and into my 30s. Looking the wrong way, not giving me the call, whatever. I felt disrespected a lot. And I've had to work on that. It's one of the major things I work on in my therapy. When I'm going and I'm talking to my therapist, is it still can get triggered where I feel disrespected.
Right.
And so now when I feel disrespected, I'm not blaming that person. I'm actually exploring in me, where is the disrespect there? And so I'm allowing that person to be the mirror. And then the way I respond, I can respond reactively and knock them down, or
Yeah.
like my friend Justin did, he responded to, you got a bad attitude, and he used creativity and says, in what ways can I piss her off? And it's sort of like there's that element, yet then is this
Yeah.
element of, when you're an elderly caregiver, you have an expectation of what you think the elderly are able to do, what they're capable of doing. And then you can react and you can get angry and frustrated, or you can ask the question, what would compassion do here?
Right.
What would patience do here? And I believe that that's a big component of taking responsibility to what goes on and then what goes out in our world.
Okay.
And so I like that as this taking more responsibility is the ability to respond. Our ability to respond gets enhanced when we take a breath. And like when we were growing up, speak to 10, count to 10 before you say something, right?
Yes.
So there's these strategies. In fact, that is one of the great strategies. If you breathe in 3 times before you lash out, you're probably going to have a better life.
Yes.
And so every day, and I believe that this is an everyday example. Now, folks that are practicing this like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and doing the opposite Tuesday, Thursday, are probably having, again, 40, 50, 60% of the time, not really great days. And so
Right.
there is a consistency of it and a continual growth component. The Japanese have a word called kaizen, and that
Oh, yes.
word is all about constant and never-ending improvement. And we're today the 2020 edition of our genealogy of our ancestry. In 5 years, hopefully, we'll have let go of some things and learned new things, and that will allow us to have perhaps a great life. And I do believe that most people that I'm meeting right now are experiencing some type of mental illness. It's growing.
Uh,
And so I guess the invitation is for more people to be curious about it, to find ways to express compassion more, and to make a positive impact on people's lives. So in some ways, humanity is becoming better for it.
Definitely. Definitely. That's sort of like one of the positive things. What have you found, I guess, out of this whole thing? What sort of things have you found for, I guess, for healing?
Well, healing is again. I love the ancient arts of healing and this being a student of healing. So, for instance, if you wake up with a headache, most people these days have been programmed and trained to pop a couple of aspirin. And so, another approach, which could be self massage. And so, if you're familiar with the hands, if you know this point right here, if you massage yourself right there, it releases into your brain the similar ingredients that aspirin releases. So
Okay.
this is a natural healing remedy through acupressure or massage. And so I've been blessed with the opportunities to learn different types of Ayurvedic and different types of shiatsu and different types of massage that allow the body to release certain endorphins and certain types of, of, of different types of enzymes to allow the body to heal itself. And so it's something I love. Self healing often comes down to the words we use, the intensity or the trauma related to it. And so a lot of what we're carrying in ourselves is not only our own traumas, yet also perhaps the traumas of our parents and our grandparents and our great grandparents. So
Yeah.
when I'm talking to people, particularly people who are really not sure why they're thinking certain things, it might be the traumas of their ancestors. And so to be a
Yes.
student of that, I like that.
Mhm.
I've been again taught different ways of using breath work and using massage and using wordology or word medicine to shift people's beliefs. And again, the latest thing that I've been working on is shift your belief about grief. I
Oh,
think
yes.
grief is something that keeps a big component of our cellular memory. And so another area that I just did a talk on it last week was um, pets, and that
Okay.
most people I met have had a trauma with pets that they've never released. Because if you were 8 years old and your dog or your cat died, and all you can remember is just crying and crying and never ever talking about it after that, you're actually carrying grief towards a pet that might affect you in your other relationships with people or
Right.
other living beings, because you don't want something to die on you. And so we created a whole myth and a whole grief cycle that becomes suppressed. Yet that suppression can grow. And so when I was in Morocco and I was leading a workshop on your animal healing,
Okay.
Love Your Pet Day, I had about 20 people share stories, and each one of them had a trauma that it was their first time they ever spoke about. Yet
Oh,
by
wow.
speaking about it and then crying about it and then letting that go, we were then able to do a prayer to their pet, and that released a lot of energy.
Oh,
And
wow.
some
That's
people
amazing.
totally looked different the next day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so some of these traumas that are developed when we're younger, and then it could even be the traumas of parents passing on some of their traumas, which again was passed on by their parents.
Hmm.
So we, as the 2020 edition of our lineage, might be carrying traumas that we're not even aware of. It's just we sort of look at things and we don't know why we're reacting that way.
Right.
So in some type of the therapy and some type of the healing that I've explored and been taught by shamans in South Africa and in India and in Europe, it is about having a conversation with our body. Our body's got incredible, as you're aware, a muscle memory. Uh,
Yes.
we have that from our hockey days, and
Hmm.
we just have a certain way of reacting, and our body's been trained. Well, similarly with our traumas, we have been taught a certain way, and most of that way has been suppressed and shame and embarrassed instead of acknowledge, breathe into and release, to let go, and then to refill with perhaps gratitude or love or forgiveness. And so that's the simplicity of it. And what's beautiful is that it can be done in nature. It can be done in your bed. It can be done with prayer. And you can measure it. You can say what level right now is the pain, and it might be a 9. And after doing a little breath work and release work and mantra work, you let it go and you ask yourself, what is it now? It's a 4. Oh, 9 to 4 is pretty good.
That's not bad.
That's what a therapist tends to do with
Right.
one, is to work with them on some of the things that they're not seeing, yet they're feeling. And so we get back into touch with our feelings.
This is awesome. Excellent stuff today, Dave. Very good.
Thank
So
you, Bill.
let's let's start to wrap up now.
Well, yes, I looked at the clock and it's like, wow, you just zoomed through that, Bill. Fantastic. I really appreciate your wonderful questions and the way that you orchestrated today. It's something that I'm really thrilled to have experienced your journey with it, and look forward to a lot more of these opportunities.
Oh, it's been excellent. I thank you. Now we've learned a lot today, and with everybody, there's probably one little thing we could all do. What kind of a simple experiment would you invite our listeners to maybe take a chance at, right now, that they could work on, and maybe, it'll get them through the next little while?
Well, I think you triggered it just a minute ago by your laughter.
Ah.
You have a laugh. You have an infectious laugh. Can you laugh for me just off, like if I ask you to laugh?
Stop.
Okay. All right. So you see how when you laugh, it does release the endorphins, the dopamine, the serotonin. And so when you laugh, and this is the thing about doing something outrageous like laughter yoga, yet what I am suggesting everyone is just laugh. Like, do that as an experiment. Consciously choose to laugh, even just for 1 minute a day, and see how that works. And people are going to say, oh, it seems weird. Well, guess what? That was an experiment I did with my mom a month ago. And today she is laughing more than I've ever seen in her life.
Awesome.
And that's at 80 years old.
Yeah.
And so the invitation for people to laugh, find even something that just makes you laugh, because that's the key. It's about your wellness. And
yes.
If you start, and it gives me goosebumps to say this. That's what I love when I say something that I really feel passionate about. I get goosebumps. So if you just decide to laugh a little bit more than you did yesterday,
yes.
Just when you're at the end of the day and you haven't laughed yet, just allow yourself to laugh. And you'll see a big difference, because then it becomes easier and it becomes a new habit. And guess what? It truly can transform your life.
Yes,
so
definitely.
Thank you so much. For
Thank
any
you,
of the
sir.
folks, you can check out Get 2020 Vision on Amazon. It's one of the places. I actually probably read Bill's testimonial for the book there. I think that might be there. There is what other ways? A meetup. We have a couple of meetups that we're involved with here at Canada Startup Meetup and a Business Skills Clinic Meetup. So these are ways to connect online. Similarly, it's a great opportunity to talk about whether it's business, whether it's sports, or whether it's mental wellness. These are topics that Bill and I are definitely been enjoying so far in 2020. Is there anything else there that you might want to share with people as we wrap up, Bill?
No, I think we're good. I guess what's the best way for everybody to get a hold of you if they have any questions or they just want to chat, or what's the
I
best
believe
way?
what we just shared, with whether the meetup group is one of the platforms that we're looking to expand and grow. So Canada Startup in Meetup, Coach Dave Rogers on Facebook. Yet I don't respond too quickly to those messages there. And then I do have a Dave Rogers on Facebook. So that would probably be the best way. If anyone really wants to reach out by email, the latest email and the one that will be evolving as we move forward is continualshift@gmail.com. Excellent. So with that, let's hope that Culture Days, I'm going to just move over so people can see culturedays.ca. It's for the next month until October 25th. And the whole idea is to really encourage people to be involved in sharing culture and making our life in Canada a whole lot better. So thank you so much for supporting that, Bill. It's been a real honor and privilege to meet with you today.
Thank you. It was excellent. I learned a lot and I had a lot of fun.